There are tons of stories out there about hacked Pokémon games. Some of them really quite neat, such as the one about a version where you get a ghost as a starter. Some are ridiculous, silly stories about individuals dying after playing a game, or the game talking to them. God, don't these writers know less is more when it comes to these stories? Ah well, I digress. I grew interested in these hacked games that are apparently in any thrift store, on eBay, or handed out by homeless people to random passers-by. I didn't have the pleasure of meeting these creepy people. I merely found this particular cartridge in a trash bin when the garbage truck backed into my neighbor's dumpster. I noticed the game and asked the trash man if I could take it, and he didn't seem to mind. It was thrown away after all. I, of course, checked with my neighbor confirm if they actually didn't want it, though they seemed perplexed as if they'd never seen it in their life. Their son made a grab for it, a little boy who saw the Charizard on the cover, crying out "Mommy, I want Pokémon," but his mother told him no, seeing as I found it. He didn't even have a Game Boy anyway, he just liked Pokémon. Thinking nothing more, I simply went home, looking at the cartridge's sticker on the way. Just a plain old red version, the sticker torn slightly across the Charizard's neck, but that was expected with such an old game. I had blue version as a kid, so I was a bit eager to see the, albeit minimal, differences red version had. I was rather disappointed by what I saw when the title screen showed up. Pokémon Strangled Red version. Well damn it, it was a hack. Hacks were neat and all, but they had zero monetary value, the original's quite valuable by now, and I wanted to play Red anyway, not this crap. Oh well, it was free, might as well try it. The name was odd however, Strangled Red? That made no sense, not even in a morbid description of someone being asphyxiated, as people turn blue when choking, not red. Who knows, maybe there was a pair of these hacks and I just got the red one. The more I thought about this though, the more interested I became. My initial disappointment turned into curiosity. I wanted to know what the creator had made, and I was going to note everything I saw. The first oddity I noticed was the start screen had a Charizard next to the trainer, instead of a Charmander. Also, the Pokémon never cycled through like the original versions did, it just stayed Charizard, even after 5 minutes of waiting. Shrugging, I hit start, noticing there was no Charizard cry as I did, like there was supposed to be. I saw there was a continue option, so I figured I'd do what everyone did with used games and see what the previous owner had done. No. I blinked in surprise. No? What do you mean no? The game wouldn't let me continue no matter what, though on the 4th attempt, I heard the Charizard cry, quiet and barely audible, but there. Shrugging it off, I decided to just hit new game, like I would have done after checking the old file anyway. The screen cut to black for a while, no Professor Oak, no starting theme, just nothing at all. Eventually, the screen came back, showing a bedroom, 2 beds, 2 TVs, and a computer in the corner. My trainer sprite was the usual one, consistent with the original red version. I was curious as to why it didn't ask my name, though that was answered as I opened the pause menu, noticing my trainer was named Steven. No, this isn't my real name or some stupid crap like that. This game isn't self-aware or haunted, at least not that I know of. It just had a name chosen already. Curious, I saw he had the starter amount of money and no badges. He didn't look exactly like Red though, as his hair was longer, almost reaching halfway down his back, Red's usual smile replaced with a confident smirk. Honestly, I found this sprite much cooler than Red. Next I checked out his Pokémon, a single Charmander, level 5, named Mickey. Nothing was odd about it, or should I say her, with the name and all. She had beginning Charmander stats, only new scratch and tail whip, basic stuff. The game seemed relatively normal. Returning to the game, I walked about the room, noticing Steven's long hair was present on the back of my trainer sprite when my back was turned to the camera. I didn't recognize the house, but I descended the stairs to see more. Downstairs was another trainer, who spoke to me the instant I came down. Ready yet? Asked Mike. Yeah, answered Steven. I assumed this Mike was my rival, pre-decided for me, a replacement of Blue, most likely. I thought back to the bedroom having 2 beds, realizing they weren't just rivals, they were brothers. They talked back and forth, basic Pokémon dialogue, become a Pokémaster, catch 'em all, stuff like that, before having a little argument over which is better, Charmander or Squirtle, which of course led to the introduction battle, like the one versus Blue in the lab, simple enough, scratch, tackle, until I won purely for having the first turn. I took note of how much better Steven's sprite looked in combat than Red's, a different pose, his hair looking like it was blowing in the wind, a brief, minor upgrade, but still, much nicer. I left the house after some more banter with my brother, stepping out to the Pallet Town theme. Going to the east, I found this was indeed Pallet Town. The house was simply on the outskirts to the west. I noted there was no mysterious grassy field like in normal Pallet Town. Wandering about, I decided to check in on Red's home. His mother was inside, and when I talked to her, she commented on how handsome Steven looked, hoping her son would look up to him as a role model for when he became a trainer himself next year, which of course led me to realize this game took place a year before the original Pokémon. Red was even upstairs, playing on the SNES in his room, commenting, "I'm gonna be the best too when it's my turn." I was starting to like this hack. It was interesting, a completely new adventure, a different character, hell. Steven even seemed to have a history with the people in his town, a reputation, a personality beyond a silent protagonist. The people in town talked to him as a person, making conversation, not just spouting tutorial crap. Even Blue's sister had new dialogue. She and Steven seemed to be in a relationship, too, as the dialogue ended with a kiss and a heart over her head. Professor Oak simply wished me well, giving me a Pokédex to aid my adventure. He wasn't giving it to me to be the reason behind the adventure like in every other Pokémon game out there. He gave it to me out of kindness, something to help me on my way, a gift. I was liking this more and more with each second. The game seemed to have an actual story now. I was somebody, not just a cookie-cutter protagonist anyone could be, not some blank sheet that could be replaced without notice. The story was different, though the actual gameplay remained unchanged. I went north like I was supposed to, went from town to town, collected badges, received the praise of the leaders. Steven's fame even seemed to spread, as some NPCs would talk like they knew him. I used Mickey for every battle, and she was growing surprisingly fast. She handled Brock with ease, even pounded Misty with no trouble at all. She wasn't as adversely affected by super effective attacks as others, did more damage than a regular Charmander, she was a veritable powerhouse. She even became a Charizard at the mere level of 25, not bad at all I must say. Things started to get weird, though, as soon as I reached Lavender Town. I know, Lavender Town is the focus behind every creepy story, but it was the only place that was noticeably different. There was no Team Rocket invasion, which I found odd, though I did remember this was a year in the past, so the invasion wouldn't occur until Red's time. I tried to enter Pokémon Tower, aiming to get a Ghastly, but that's when it got odd. Steven said, "I have no reason to be here." Steven wouldn't go into Pokémon Tower no matter what I did. This was weird. I mean, hell, there are a million places in Kanto you really have no need to be, little random houses with nothing but children NPCs, for example. Why was it here that Steven wouldn't enter? With a shrug, I figured I wouldn't need a Ghastly, seeing as Mickey could handle anything, so I simply went on my way, Lavender Town serving no purpose other than a passageway with a Poké Center. The game progressed normally from there. The remaining gyms fell and eventually I made my way to the Elite Four and defeated them. As with Blue, my brother Mike was there before me, initiating the championship battle, which Mickey swept with ease. The aftermath of the battle was quite pleasant, none of the tension that was present between Red and Blue at the end of their match. The brothers congratulated each other on their progress and shook hands, before the screen went white, no Hall of Fame, nor any credits. When the screen came back, it was at the house again, the two brothers sitting at the computer, conversing with each other. Steven says I don't want to, come on, I just gotta borrow her for a second to finish the Pokédex, the entry won't register unless she recognizes me as master for just a second, Mike replied. But she's my Mickey, I promise I'll give her back, come on, please? Then the option to pick yes or no showed up. I was a bit perplexed, so I hit no to be cautious. Come on, please, Mike begged. No, again. Come on, please, he asked again. I realized this would simply continue to loop until I hit yes, so I did, just to see what would happen. Alright, this will just take a sec, then we'll both be Pokemasters, Mike exclaimed. Steven stood in silence. The screen changed to the animation shown when two people trade Pokemon, which I found a bit weird, seeing as I was solo, but whatever, this was what was apparently supposed to happen. Mickey went first. I watched lazily as she began to travel down the trading tube. Snap! That made me jump, the sudden noise resonating in my silent bedroom, loud due to the volume being way up. Looking at the screen, I noticed the game had seemed to freeze, Mickey still in mid-trade, but the game wasn't doing anything. With a sigh, I just turned off the game, wondering when my last save was. When the game turned back on, I stared for a moment at the start screen. There was no Charizard next to the trainer. Upon pressing start, I saw the new game option was absent, leaving only continue. This was strange to say the least, so I selected it, the game starting without even showing my stats as usual. My jaw dropped at what I was greeted with. 1 year later the Lavender Town theme came first, playing its normal way, the screen slowly fading in from blackness. Steven was in the Pokemon Tower, which made the music even stranger, seeing as the tower had its own theme. He was standing in front of a tombstone, not doing anything. Wondering what was going on, I pressed A. Confused, I tried walking, realizing I was indeed in control at the moment. I brought up the pause menu and checked my party. Mickey was gone. Not just Mickey, all Pokemon. He had nothing, the Pokédex was absent from the menu, his bag was empty. Honestly concerned now, I checked his trainer card. He had no money. He had no badges. His playtime was 8,795 hours, which was impossible as I had only 30 logged in before. But that wasn't the strangest part. His picture, the picture of the handsome, confident young trainer was different. His eyes were blank, his face turned slightly down, that smirk of his was gone, replaced by a lack of any expression at all, that long hair of his, before in a perfect perm, was now messy and unkempt. I couldn't look at him anymore. Closing the menu, I went to move out of the tower, but with every step I took away from the tombstone, the screen flickered, like it did when a Pokemon was poisoned. Gulping, I brought up the trainer card again, his picture was getting worse. Every step I took, he hung his head more and more, his shoulder slumped, he bent over. By the time I had exited the tower, he was on his knees. Hands to his face, hair draped across him. I had guessed already what was going on, but this clinched it. I began to put some things together in my mind. I had always wondered why there was no champion in the original games besides your rival. Why is it you, the protagonist, had to beat your rival when he just waltzed in, no previous champion to challenge? Then, it struck me. The answer was right here. The previous champion gave up. His precious Mickey was apparently dead, and with her, so died part of him. His Pokédex, the other Pokemon, his badges, his fame, all of it, he threw it away. In that year, the year that I missed, the year where all those hours came from, I even did the math, there is 8,765 hours in a year, add that to my 30 from before and it matched up. Even so, the game kept going, this should have been an ending I thought, I mean, what else was there to do? I had no Pokédex, no Pokemon, not anything. What was I supposed to be doing? I talked to everyone in the town, but they all said similar things. Are you okay? Still mourning, I see. Everything will be all right. Please. Is there anything we can do? Steven never replied to them, and they all simply said the same things over and over. I couldn't put the game down now, this was all so strange. Curious, I headed off into the tall grass, and eventually got into a battle with a Rattata. No Pokémon was sent out, just Steven's sprite. I was wondering how I'd battle. Wild Rattata left you be. The battle ended without anything happening. This was certainly interesting, and it happened with every Pokémon I encountered. Wild Pidgey ignored you. Wild Ponyta wandered off. The music never changed either. No matter where I went, Lavender Town came from the speakers, following me, sometimes slowed down slightly, sometimes not. I searched everywhere, every town, talked to everybody, wondering just what the hell I needed to do. My frustration was mixing with the depressing atmosphere of all this, making the experience altogether unnerving and uncomfortable, but I couldn't tear myself away. I was starting to get a bit angry though, nobody telling me anything besides giving me their condolences and trying to give me items like lemonade or coffee, each met with, "No," Steven said. I slapped myself for idiocy, suddenly realizing how the likely answer was right in front of me, Pallet Town of course. When I went there though, which took a long time, having to walk, no Pokémon to fly with, no bicycle to ride, and Steven only seemed to move half the regular movement speed, it wasn't much different. I first tried talking to Professor Oak. "These things happen, you were just unlucky." Next I tried Blue's sister. "Please. Don't leave home again." Red's mom wouldn't even talk to me at all. With nowhere else in mind to go, I walked to the west, finding the house from the beginning, which I had never entered since leaving Pallet Town. Inside was Mike, but talking to him was just as useless. "I'm so sorry," he said. I pondered for a moment if this really was the ending. Steven doomed to do nothing but roam Kanto in misery, haunted by the memories, forced to listen to everyone's concerns about him. As a last-ditch effort to do anything, I went to the bedroom and walked over to the bed. "I'm going to sleep," Steven said. The screen faded to black for a moment, but then slowly faded back in, the world having a black tint to it, the Mike's sprite laying in the other bed. I assumed this meant it was night. Steven said, "I'm going to do it." "Do what?" Again, I had no idea, tried inspecting everything in the room, nothing happened. As soon as I left the house, another dialogue. "It can bring her back. It can do anything." What in the hell was it? Something that could do anything. I couldn't for the life of me figure it out. Wandering about, I tried to leave Pallet Town the usual way. Not that way. He wouldn't go any further. I tried the homes. Screw them. I quirked my eyebrow at that, forgetting for a moment this was not a real Pokémon game. The vulgarity just took me off guard. I continued to look around, but there was nowhere I could go, until I accidentally stepped on the ocean, and Steven walked right in, only the upper half of his sprite visible, like the swimmers you encounter in the Cerulean Gym. I didn't know he could swim. "The missing one," he said. "Missing one?" I paused for a moment. No, he couldn't possibly mean that. I hadn't tried the missing no trick on this hack yet, but it just fit too well, that had to be what he meant. I surfed all the way towards Cinnabar Island. I began to feel something was off, more so than this already was. Silence. The Lavender Town theme had stopped, there was no noise at all, nor were there any Pokémon. I just kept going, finding Cinnabar and surfing up and down the east coast. Lo and behold, Wild Missing No appeared. "Mine," Steven said during the battle. Wild Missing No was caught. What the hell? Steven didn't do anything, he just commanded that atrocity of broken data to join him, no, become his possession, and it did. I was getting more and more disturbed by this all. Checking the start menu, I saw Missing No was not in my party, but instead an item, making things even stranger. I checked the trainer card as well. Steven has his back to me, his long hair draped behind him, his hands in his pockets, nothing else. Remembering what he said at the start of this night, I realized what I had to do. I surfed to land and made my way northeast to, where else, Lavender Town. Along the way, I noticed all the trainers, oddly still out at this hour, wouldn't look at Steven, all of them turning when he passed, even those that were normally static. I tried talking to one of the officers in the guardhouse type buildings. Just go. They all said the same thing, though one sent chills down my spine. Sometimes dead is best. My hands were sweating by this point. Stephen was about to try the impossible, something some would see as a crime against nature, which many of these people shared that opinion. I steeled myself, it's just a game, and I was going to complete it. It took an eternity to reach Pokémon Tower, but I got there eventually. Taking a deep breath and heading toward the tombstone, I remembered which one. The image of Stephen standing before it was burned into my mind after all. First, I tried inspecting it. Mickey, Stephen said. Nothing happened. With a gulp, I opened the menu and selected Missing No from the bag. Stephen, don't use it, a message appeared from Professor Oak. I was reminded of when Professor Oak would magically tell you that you couldn't use a key item somewhere, like when using the bicycle in a building, though the message this time was different. Even worse, Stephen responded to it. In a world that cheated me, why should I play fair? Stephen used it. Stephen obtained %. $. Clearly that was a corrupted version of Mickey. What in God's name did I obtain? I couldn't tell you, because the game took away my control. Without my input, Stephen began to leave the tower on his own, walking single step by single step. The Lavender Town theme started again as he left the tower and began his excruciatingly slow journey against my will. Every time he crossed one of the borders where the music would change, it got progressively slower, more and more disturbing. By the time he reached Cerulean City, it was a demonic rumbling. I just stared, watching him, trying to guess where he was going, but it was getting more and more obvious. He was heading to Pallet Town. The music had all but stopped when he got there, playing single note by single note. He went exactly where I had guessed, right to his own house, inside, and up the stairs. At this point there was no music. Stephen moved step by step, stopping at his brother's bed, turning to face him. At first, though the game froze, he didn't do anything, simply stood there, and I couldn't move him. I did, however, find out I could open the pause menu. I was terrified to look, but I couldn't stop myself. I selected his trainer card. There was a low growl noise, like a distorted Pokémon cry. Stephen was looking at me again, directly at the screen. He was hunched over, his bangs obscuring his face. His hair was wild and feathered out. Between his bangs, there wasn't even a face at all, just black, two red eyes looking straight forward, a white grin contrasting with the darkness. That wasn't all. His name was now corrupted and read S%3v3n. I couldn't look away, my eyes glued to his, not breaking contact for some time. My vision was getting blurry until I couldn't see very well, my face grew wet. I was crying, like a baby. There was nothing I could do to hold back the tears. I was with this boy from the start. I built him up to greatness, and was then forced to watch his decline after a tragic accident, and now, he was this. This thing, this abomination. I watched him go insane. Halting my tears, wiping my eyes, I closed out of the trainer card and tried to save the game, wanting to just quit. The game informed me this was impossible. Nothing can be saved now. The pause menu wouldn't close no matter what I did. So with no other option, I checked the bag. Nothing happened. I checked Pokémon, and there was one. A single sprite met me. It had 0 HP, its status, dead, its name $. I selected it, and I was greeted with 4 options. Picking status gave the message, it's her. Picking switch said, never. Picking close brought up, no. The final option said, strangle. My fingers shaking, I selected strangle, and the menu closed, showing Stephen in the room again. Goodbye, snap. The game shut itself off. I was more dumbfounded than frightened. In a bit of shock, I turned it back on, the title screen showing the manic corrupted Stephen and a horribly glitched Charizard. I pressed start, then continue. All I saw was a zoomed out view of Pallet Town, showing Stephen's home to the west, tall grass surrounding it, those unmovable stones blocking it from the rest of the town. The image was completely static, no music, no movement, before fading to white, going back to the title screen. It was as it had been when I first popped it in. A trainer and a Charizard. I attempted to hit continue. No. This happened to me last Christmas. It would be around 11 o'clock at night on Christmas Eve. My parents were not at home, and would not be back until the next day, as they were partying at my grandparents' house. Under normal circumstances I would have gone, but I was sick. So there I was, alone in my house, with a fever of 37.5, watching TV, when suddenly my doorbell rang. I went to see who it was. I wasn't expecting any visitors and I knew it couldn't be my parents, since my grandparents' town is an hour and a half away from where we live, and they had called me to let me know that they had arrived only a quarter of an hour ago. I looked through the peephole to see who it was, but no one was there. I assumed it was a drunk idiot, on Christmas Eve night. I opened the door to make him leave, but when I did, I found a package on the landing. Wow! It seemed that Santa Claus had come early this year. I don't know who would have bitten, but at the time he seemed like a pretty generous person. However, to my misfortune, my disappointment was not long in coming. I took the package home and opened it. Inside was an envelope on which was written, "Keep it, I don't want it anymore," along with a copy of Pokémon Silver version, the original. I thought that was great at the time, as I had fond memories of that game, and mine had run out of battery power, making it impossible to save the game. I grabbed my old Game Boy Advance SP and began my journey. However, first I opened the envelope to see what was inside and found a note with instructions to follow. Still to this day, I keep it along with the game, and it says, "Hello, if you are reading this, it is because you have my game, and since I have given it to you, I ask you to please continue it up to the point I tell you in this letter, then you can play freely." Well, since you gave it to me, I thought, this is the least I could do, right? I read on. First, don't start a new game, continue mine already saved. I have captured the 3 legendary dogs, and I've given the GS ball to Kurt, so as soon as you go talk to him you can capture Celebi. I have captured 248 Pokémon. Besides Celebi I'm missing Lugia and Ho-Oh. Please capture them and complete the Pokédex. Damn, what luck! He had practically handed it all to me on a golden platter. I was really looking forward to completing the Pokédex, so I got on with it. I continued the game that had already been started by its former owner and started checking its data. The trainer's name was Seuss J, a bit odd for a trainer's name, but I'll tell what it means later, if you haven't figured it out for yourselves. My team consisted of a Houndoom, a Lapras and a Slowbro, at levels 66, 32 and 63 respectively, and a Sandshrew, an Abra and a Pidgey at very low levels, which I probably had them to use the HMs. I had all 16 badges and the money limit. Playing time 662 hours 50 minutes or thereabouts. That made me think the previous owner was a total addict, and the Pokégear read about 11:50 p.m. on Saturday. The same time and day of the week as the one I was playing on. At the time that just seemed like coincidence to me. Once I knew my data, I started playing. First I fought and captured Celebi, since I was in Azalea Town right at the start and it was the closest one to me. I did the whole process. I went to talk to Kurt, I received the GS ball, then I went to Ilex Forest, I deposited it in the shrine to the guardian of the forest, and the battle with Celebi began. I was very excited to capture him, since without a special event you can't get him. I caught him after a while, when I got tired of throwing normal Pokeballs at him and threw him a Great Ball, out of 3 I had, and I got a message saying that he had been transferred to Bill's PC, to Pandora's box. Pandora's box? I figured it was a joke. For those who don't know, Pandora's box is a myth, I think Greek, which says that if it is opened, demons will come out of it, things like that, and the human race will be doomed. Without giving it too much importance, since the name of the boxes could be changed, I continued and captured the other 2 legendaries I had left. It was easy, as I said before, I had the necessary Master Balls. Once I had captured all the legendaries, and thus completed the Pokédex, I continued reading the instructions given to me by the former owner. Second, now that you have captured all the legendaries, create the following team: Mew, Celebi, Ho-Oh, Lugia, Suicune, and Moltres. Wait for the Pokégear to mark 3 a.m. to perform the next step. So it was 1 a.m. in the game, and since it marked the same time it actually was, I had to stay awake until 3 as well. I didn't mind, I was having a good time playing that game. I went to talk to Professor Oak, to see what he would tell me about the Pokédex, went to Celadon City to get the diploma certifying that I had completed the Pokédex, defeated Red and took a look at the other boxes. The guy had even caught the 4 missing no's. I kept fooling around like that until I realized that it was already 2:45 a.m. I read the next step. Third, when it's 3 a.m. go to the ruins of Alph, enter the main chamber and go to the last statue following the corridor down. In front of it put the unknown radio signal, and talk to it. So I did. I went pulling towards the ruins of Alph. I took the magnet train, because I was in Kanto, and from Goldenrod City to my destination I walked. I had plenty of time. When I finally arrived it was 2:58, so I waited for 2 minutes in front of the statue, with the unknown radio signal on. That noise was making me quite nervous. When the Pokégear finally read 3 a.m., I spoke to the statue. It emitted the cry of a Pokémon. But it didn't sound like one I knew. And text boxes started popping up: Mew is gone. And Mew's cry. Celebi is no more. And her cry, and so on until they named all the Pokémon on my team. At the end, another text box came up: Your team's sacrifice has allowed the release of the Unown King. When I closed the text box the screen went black for about 2 seconds and then it popped up on the King Unown's page in the Pokédex, which went something like this: This ferocious beast can sleep for centuries and when it wakes it will kill anything for food. It had no number and its cry was the one that had sounded before. It was dark blue like the Unown, but its form only resembled them in the head where it had 3 spikes, like a crown, and it had only 1 eye. Unlike the Unown, this one had a body, legs and arms ending in spikes stained red. I guess it could be blood. When I closed the Pokédex I appeared back where I had found the Unown King and another message popped up saying you have released the beast. When I closed it, the game automatically saved. I then had exactly 666 hours of gameplay. I looked at my equipment, but now I had no Pokémon. The game started to get on my nerves. I left the chamber and headed for Violet City, to pick up some Pokémon from the PC. During the ride to said city, I noticed that there was something strange, plus the music from the unknown radio signal kept playing everywhere I went, but I only noticed it as soon as I entered the Pokémon Center. There were no people. The NPCs had disappeared. When I looked inside the PC, I found that out of the 20 practically full boxes, there were now only 2 Pokémon in Pandora's box. A level 20 Staryu and the Sandshrew from before. I didn't know what was going on, so I was wandering all over Johto. There were no NPCs in any town, no route, not even in the houses. I read the next step of the note: Fourth, wait for the call. The call, from whom? I didn't know who was supposed to call me, so I opened the Pokégear and looked at the numbers. Only Professor Elms and Gold's mother, the playable character, were there. I called Professor Elm, but a message popped up saying, he doesn't seem to be answering. And when I called Gold's mother I got the usual text. It was already 3:30 a.m. and still no one had called me back. I had already kicked almost all of Johto and there wasn't a single person, and there were no Pokémon in the grass either. Finally the call came. It was from Gold's mother. It said, son, please come home quickly. The cry of the Unown King sounded and the call ended. Between the fever and the sleepiness I was already starting to feel sick, but I wanted to know what was going on and now I knew where to go. In my house there was no one, however, upstairs there seemed to be a note on the wall. I read it and it said, fifth, and last, go see Professor Oak. Before I left, I looked at the houses in Newbark Town to see if anyone was there, however, as I already feared, there was no one. Not one NPC in all of Johto. Now I knew I had to go to Kanto, and since I couldn't take either the SSN or the magnet train, then I understood why I had just those two Pokémon, so I could go surfing all the way to Kanto. However, before going to see Professor Oak, I took a walk around Kanto to see if anyone was there. There only seemed to be Mr. Fuji in Lavender Town. I talked to him and he said, "I've been very busy lately." That's when I understood what was going on. The Unown King had killed every person and Pokémon in the game, hence what his Pokédex page said. After talking to possibly the last person in the game, I went to Pallet Town. I had no flight, but there were no Pokémon in the grass or water either, so it didn't take me long to get there. There was no one there either, neither in Red's house, nor in Blue's house. I entered Professor Oak's laboratory. As expected, there was not even an NPC. But where Professor Oak normally stands, there was the mini sprite of Unown. I guessed what I had to do, so I stood in front of it and pressed A. The cry of the Unown King sounded and the battle against it began. He was level 100 and to top it off, equipped with several full restores. He finished off my Pokémon in no time, but as soon as the last of my Pokémon was weakened, the battle continued. Gold was at level 10. I already knew I was not going to be able to do anything against that monster. I thought about turning off the console, but then I reconsidered. I told myself that if I didn't see how it ended, I would be intrigued because maybe this wouldn't happen to me again. After all, it was a game, what could happen to me? Gold only knew Tackle, but he didn't get to use it because the Unown King attacked first. He used Bite and Gold was weakened. A message came up saying, "Sus J is dead." The screen went black for a few seconds and then a sprite of a man dressed in black appeared like how Professor Oak appears at the beginning of the game. He said the following to me, "Sus J. You just released the beast and doomed the human race. I couldn't have done it without you." Then the screen went black and after a minute, the normal intro of the game started, with Lugia flying in the blue sky. There was no previous saved game, I could only start a new one. It was already 4:30 a.m., so I turned off the console and tried to sleep, since, besides being sick, I felt very tired. That night I dreamed that I was King Unown and I was wandering around the world looking for my next victim. I don't know if this was a morbid joke, or if it really had a supernatural origin. What I do know is that I was a month without stopping to think about it and that every time I remember it my hair stands on end and I even have nightmares about it from time to time. If it was a joke, which I hope it is, I think it was a joke of a Satanist or something. 3 a.m. is considered Satan's hour, which just coincided with the 666 hours of gameplay. Sus J is Jesus in reverse, not to mention the release of the beast. Of one thing I am sure, having played that game has left me scarred for life.